It was the kind of morning that whispered calm, the hum of the dishwasher, the clink of ceramic under warm water, the gentle gurgle of brewing coffee. Emily Thompson stood in her modest kitchen in Eugene, Oregon, rinsing Lily's sippy cup under the faucet. The light poured in through the windows, soft and golden, spilling across countertops and catching in the steam that curled upward from the sink. Outside, the world was equally quiet. The backyard, enclosed by a white fence and shaded by a pair of old birch trees, was alive with birdsong and the occasional gust of wind that rustled the leaves. And in the middle of that calm scene was her daughter, Lily. 17 months, old pink sun hat slightly askew, wobbling over the grass with all the clumsy determination of toddlerhood. Next to her, silent and ever watchful, was Ranger. Ranger was the newest member of the family, a large German shepherd with a scar down his flank and eyes that held lifetimes. They'd adopted him just days ago from the local shelter. He didn't bark, didn't chase balls, didn't nudge for attention. He simply watched, every movement, every sound, every ripple of tension in the air. Some might have called him broken. Emily saw something else, restraint, maybe even wisdom. She turned from the sink to gaze at them through the window. Lily had a red rubber ball in her hands. Ranger sat still beside her, ears perked. Emily smiled. She had doubted, of course. Everyone had. A rescue with a toddler, friends had said. Even David, her husband, had reservations. But there was something about Ranger, a gravity, an unspoken vow. But then was something shifted. Emily's hand froze mid-rinse. The laughter outside stopped. A strange silence blanketed the backyard, thick, unnatural. Her gaze snapped to the yard. Ranger was no longer sitting. He was moving, fast, toward Lily. At first she thought it was play, maybe a clumsy attempt at a game, but the way he lunged, not bounding, but bracing, told another story. His body was taut, his head low, eyes locked onto something Emily couldn't see. And then he did the unthinkable. Ranger slammed into Lily with his shoulder, knocking her off her feet. She landed hard on the grass. Emily's mouth dropped open. Before she could even scream, Ranger gripped Lily's diaper in his jaws and flung her, tossed her like a rag doll across the lawn. Emily's scream ripped through the morning silence. The cup shattered in the sink as she bolted toward the door. Her heart was thunder in her chest. Her mind spiraled. The stories, the warnings, the doubts. She'd trusted him. She'd let her baby out of her sight. And now her world was collapsing. She didn't know it yet. But what she saw next would change everything. Just a few weeks before that morning, the Thompson household was quieter, simpler, and smaller. Emily Thompson was an elementary school teacher in Eugene, Oregon. She loved routines, clean kitchen counters, the scent of lemon soap, the low hum of classical music during lesson planning. Her husband, David, worked remotely as a software engineer. He was pragmatic, cautious, a thinker. Their daughter, Lily, 17 months old, was joy wrapped in chaos, always laughing, always exploring, always watching. And yet there was a silence in the house, a quiet between moments, a space where something else belonged. Emily had felt it first. Not a longing for another baby, not quite. It was more primal than that, a need for another presence, a companion. One evening, as Lily dozed in her crib, Emily brought it up over dinner. "What if we got a dog?" she asked casually, spooning pasta onto her plate. David looked up. "A dog with Lily this young?" "Not a puppy," she said quickly. "Not from a breeder. I was thinking we could adopt. Maybe an older dog. One that needs a home." David raised an eyebrow. "An older dog with an unknown history, around a toddler." "I know how it sounds," Emily said. "But I've been thinking about this. Lily's starting to understand more. She mimics us, watches how we treat others. What better way to teach empathy than to show her what it means to care for someone?" "Who's been hurt?" He didn't answer immediately. He rarely did. But Emily saw the flicker of consideration behind his eyes. She knew he would come around. Within a week, they were visiting shelters. Some dogs barked excitedly, throwing themselves against cages. Others cowered in corners. Emily's heart broke for all of them. But none felt right. Until Ranger. He didn't bark, didn't wag, didn't flinch. He simply sat at the back of his kennel, watching, not coldly, not fearfully, but with a kind of quiet assessment, as if he were choosing them as much as they were choosing him. The shelter staff told them Ranger had been through a lot. He'd been intended for training as a guard dog, but the previous owner had abused him. When he was surrendered, he was underweight, injured, and emotionally shut down. The shelter had done what they could, but they didn't expect a full recovery. "He's not aggressive," one of the techs said, "but he's wary, withdrawn. We don't recommend him for families with young kids." David shook his head. "That's a deal breaker, right?" But Emily wasn't listening. She was kneeling outside Ranger's kennel. He had stood up, just barely, and walked to the gate. Their eyes met. He didn't lick her hand. He didn't whine. He simply lifted one paw and placed it gently against the metal gate, and Emily felt something shift in her chest. "He just needs someone to trust," she whispered. David sighed. "You always see the good, even when it's buried under scars." "Especially then," she replied. They took Ranger home that afternoon. No celebration, no barking. Just a silent, heavy dog climbing into the back seat and resting his head against Lily's car seat, as if he already understood his place. And maybe, in some way, he did. The day of the incident began like any other. A soft breeze danced through the half-open windows, stirring the curtains in Emily's kitchen. She stood at the sink, rinsing Lily's favorite cup, the one with faded cartoon animals around the rim. The smell of coffee hung in the air, and the light was warm, golden, peaceful. Outside, 17-month-old Lily giggled in the backyard, chasing a red ball across the lawn. Her laughter drifted through the screen door, bright, delighted, unmistakably innocent, and just behind her, like a silent guardian, was Ranger. Ranger was lying in the shade of the birch tree, paws tucked under him, his eyes half closed. The German Shepherd had been with them for less than 2 weeks, and yet his bond with Lily had already become something Emily marveled at daily. He was always near, always alert, but never intrusive, like he understood the weight of his presence. Emily glanced up from the sink and smiled. Moments like this felt like quiet miracles. A once-broken dog and a still-growing child, perfectly matched. She turned back to her task, letting her mind wander. Plans for dinner. An email to respond to. She barely noticed when the laughter stopped. What made her look up wasn't the silence itself, but the shape of it. The way it filled the house too quickly, too completely. She turned toward the window, and her heart stopped. Ranger was no longer lying down. He was moving, running, straight toward Lily. For a split second, Emily's brain offered her a harmless explanation. They were playing. He was just excited. But that flicker was gone as quickly as it came. The way Ranger moved, low to the ground, muscles taut, tail rigid. This wasn't play. It was purpose. Emily's hands trembled. Her breath caught in her chest. She slammed her mug into the sink, shattering it, and sprinted toward the back door. But before she even reached the handle, Ranger barreled into Lily. The toddler flew, backwards, landing hard on the grass. Emily's scream split the quiet. "No, Ranger!" She was halfway across the deck when she saw it happen again. Ranger lunged forward, grabbed Lily by the waistband of her diaper, and lifted her just for a second, before flinging her sideways across the lawn. It didn't make sense. Emily's brain short-circuited. All she could think of was blood. Bites. Regret. Every article she'd read, every warning she'd brushed aside. They'd trusted a rescue dog around their baby. And now her daughter was lying limp in the grass. Emily fell to her knees beside Lily, scooping her up, frantically checking for wounds. Scratches. Anything. Lily whimpered, blinked. She was breathing. She was crying. There was a faint red, Mark on her cheek, a small tear in her shirt, grass stains on her knees. But she was alive. That's when Emily looked up. Ranger was standing still, a few feet away. His body shook. Drool dripped from his mouth. One front paw was lifted, awkward and swollen, and then she saw it, a flicker of movement in the grass. Red, yellow, black, a coral snake, slithering just inches from where Lily had stood moments before. Emily gasped. Her mind scrambled to recall the rhyme. Red on yellow, kill a fellow. This snake, this silent, deadly thread had been hiding in the grass, ready to strike. And Ranger had seen it. Ranger had intervened. All at once, the scene rewrote itself in her mind. The charge, the shove, the throw, they weren't violence, they were desperation. They were protection. She turned back to him. "Oh my God," she whispered, crawling over. Ranger was down now, collapsed onto the grass. His breath came in shallow gasps. The bitten leg trembled uncontrollably. Emily's heart broke all over again. He hadn't hurt her child. He had saved her, and now he was dying. Panic surged again, but this time it was directed elsewhere. She wrapped Lily in her arms, stood up shakily, and ran back into the house. Her phone, her keys, her shoes. She dialed the emergency vet as she scrambled to find a towel large enough to carry Ranger. Her voice shook as she gave their address. "He's been bitten by a coral snake. Please, please hurry." Back outside, Ranger hadn't moved. Emily dropped to her knees, whispering to him, "I'm here. I see you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He didn't lift his head, but his eyes met hers. And that was enough. Somehow, she managed to lift his limp, heavy body into the back of the car. Lily, still shaken but stable, sat in her car seat. Emily drove like she never had before, reckless, praying, crying. In her rearview mirror, Ranger lay motionless. By the time they reached the emergency clinic, Emily was shaking. Vet techs rushed to them, lifting Ranger onto a stretcher. "We've got him," someone said. Emily stood outside, holding Lily close. Her thoughts spiraled. What if she hadn't looked up? What if she hadn't trusted her instincts? What if, worst of all, she'd stopped Ranger? Hours passed. The vet said the antivenom had been administered. It was now a matter of time. The next morning, when the phone rang, Emily couldn't breathe. "He made it," the vet said. 3 simple words, and everything inside her collapsed. She sank to the floor, Lily playing quietly beside her, and wept. Because now she knew the truth. Ranger wasn't just a dog, he was a hero, and none of them would ever be the same. The moment Emily saw the swelling on Ranger's leg, panic struck her harder than before. The snake, she now recognized it instantly. Red on yellow, kill a fellow. A coral snake, one of the deadliest in North America. And it had struck the only thing standing between it and her daughter. Ranger stood on trembling legs, panting heavily, his usually sharp gaze clouded with pain. Foam gathered at the edge of his mouth, and his back paw twitched uncontrollably. Emily's heart screamed at her to do something, to act, but her mind lagged behind. The moment was too big, too unreal. She reached out, steadying herself on the grass, cradling Lily in one arm. The toddler whimpered, her fingers clutching her mother's shirt. But she was safe. Alive. All because of him. "It's okay, baby," Emily whispered to Lily, though her voice cracked. Her eyes stayed locked on Ranger. Then she snapped into motion. She handed Lily off to a neighbor who had come running at the sound of her screams, gave brief instructions through shallow breaths, and ran inside to grab whatever she could think of: a beach towel, her phone, her car keys. Ranger hadn't moved. His breaths came in short, shallow bursts now, his body too heavy for his legs. Emily knelt beside him and spoke softly, urgently. "You saved her. Now let me save you, please." Lifting him was out of the question. He was over 90 pounds of muscle, fur, and limp exhaustion. But she had the towel. With trembling hands, she rolled him onto it. He whined, a soft, painful sound that pierced her deeper than any scream could have. She gritted her teeth and began dragging, inch by inch, across the grass. Then up the wooden deck. Her muscles burned, her arms screamed. But she didn't stop. Couldn't. With one last heave, she got him into the back of the SUV. She slammed the trunk and jumped into the driver's seat, heart pounding. 10 miles. That's how far the emergency vet clinic was. 10 miles of stoplights, morning traffic, and winding suburban roads. Emily ran them all. Red lights blurred past. Horns blared, none of it registered. She only saw Ranger in the rearview mirror, his head rising and falling in increasingly shallow rhythms. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Don't you give up, not now." When she screeched into the clinic's parking lot, the techs were already waiting. She had called ahead, her voice frantic, barely coherent. A young man with blue scrubs yanked the hatch open. One look at Ranger's swollen leg and glassy eyes was enough. Venom. Likely coral snake. "He's crashing." They whisked him inside, disappearing, behind double doors. And then Emily was alone. The waiting room was too bright, too sterile. She paced. She cried. She tried to call David but couldn't get the words out. Texted instead. "Emergency vet, coral snake, Ranger saved Lily, pray." Minutes passed, then an hour, then another. A vet finally emerged, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and blood-stained gloves. "We've administered the anti-venom. He's stable for now, but it's touch and go. The next 12 hours are critical. He was bitten hard, and coral venom, well, you know." Emily nodded. She didn't trust her voice. She went home that night without him. David met her at the door. Lily was asleep, blissfully unaware. Emily collapsed into his arms, tears soaking his shoulder. "He saved her," she kept whispering. "He saved her." That night, Emily barely slept. Every time her eyes closed, she saw it all again. Ranger's charge, Lily's fall, the snake, and then his eyes dimming. At dawn, the phone rang. She answered it with trembling hands. "He made it through the night," the vet said. "He's not out of the woods, but he's fighting." Emily drove back immediately. When Ranger saw her enter the room, his tail thumped once. That was all she needed. She sat beside him for hours, her hand gently stroking his side, whispering all the things she hadn't said before. "Thank you. I'm sorry I doubted you. You're not broken. You're family." When the vet came in to check his vitals, Emily asked, "Can I bring him home soon?" "Maybe in a few days, if the swelling keeps going down and he starts eating again." And he did. Day by day, Ranger improved, slow, steady, like a mountain refusing to erode. When he finally came home, the whole neighborhood seemed to know. There were balloons on the mailbox, a welcome sign made in crayon by the kids down the street. Even the mailman left a note. "He's a good boy, thank him for me." Emily didn't stop thanking him, not ever. In the weeks that followed, Ranger became more than a pet. He became a legend, but to Emily, he was still the quiet dog who placed a paw on the kennel gate and asked for a second chance, and gave them all so much more in return. Ranger returned home on a quiet Sunday evening. The sun had begun its descent, casting long golden shadows across the living room floor. Emily stood by the door, her heart caught somewhere between gratitude and guilt. Lily squealed the moment. She saw him, her tiny feet pattering against hardwood as she ran to her hero. Ranger's steps were slow. His leg was heavily bandaged, and his breathing still carried a labored edge. But his eyes were alert. A flicker of recognition lit them up as Lily collapsed into him, arms flung around his neck. "Ray, Ray!" His tail thumped against the floor. Just once. But it was enough. Emily knelt beside them, running her fingers gently through his fur. He leaned. Into her touch, his weight pressing into her knee. "You're home," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You came back." The days that followed were unlike any Emily had ever lived through. Ranger needed care around the clock. His medication schedule was strict. The venom had left him weakened, especially in his front leg. Every meal had to be coaxed. Every movement was slow, stiff. But Ranger never once growled, never once snapped. He took it all with the quiet patience of a creature who understood that life had just granted him a second chance. David, too, changed. Where once there had been hesitation, now there was reverence. He carried Ranger up the stairs when the dog was too tired. He sat by him at night, a laptop balanced on one knee, one hand resting on the shepherd's back. The man who once feared the unknown had made space for it in the center of his life. And Lily, oh Lily, she became his shadow. Every morning she woke up asking, "Where Ray Ray?" She would bring him her toys, cover him with her favorite blanket, even offer him bits of her toast. Ranger accepted each gift like a knight receiving offerings from a queen. There was never pity in Lily's eyes, only love. To her, Ranger wasn't broken. He was brave. News of the incident had spread quickly. A local vet tech had shared the story anonymously on social media. Soon it was picked up by a local paper, then a regional news station, and then, somehow, national headlines. "Rescue dog saves toddler from venomous snake," the headlines read. The public couldn't get enough. Interviews, donation offers, adoption interest in the shelter skyrocketed. Emily declined most interviews. It wasn't about going viral. It was about truth, and Ranger's truth was sacred. Still, she agreed to one appearance, sitting on a sunlit porch with Lily in her lap and Ranger at her side. When the reporter asked, "Do you think he knew what he was doing?" Emily smiled. "I think he made a choice. I think he knew the risk. And I think he decided her life was worth more than his." The clip went viral within hours. Thousands of comments poured in. People shared photos of their own rescue animals, their own second chances. Hashtags trended. "Thank you, Ranger," "Rescue Hero," "Dogs No More," and in the midst of it all, Ranger healed. Slowly, his energy returned. The swelling went down. He limped less. He ate more. His fur grew back in patches where the IVs had shaved it away. He even wagged his tail more than once a day. They celebrated each milestone. First bark, first playful step, first tail chase. Ranger was becoming something he had never been before, carefree, but the legacy he left was larger than recovery. Ranger became a symbol, not just of heroism, but of what it means to look past fear and see potential. Schools invited Emily to speak. Children sent drawings of dogs wearing capes. One girl sent a letter. "I used to be scared of big dogs, but now I know they can be gentle too." The shelter where Ranger had waited so long saw a surge in adoptions. Families came looking not for puppies but for stories, for second chances. For dogs who looked a little worn around the edges, Emily and David started a local initiative, the Ranger Trust. It provided training support for rescue adoptions, education on dog behavior, and even a fund to cover emergency veterinary costs for families in need. Ranger became the face of it all, his image sketched in charcoal on their logo, his name stitched into every collar they donated. And through it all, he remained humble, silent, loyal. One evening, months after the incident, Emily sat with Ranger, on the same back porch where it had all begun. Lily slept inside. David worked at the kitchen table. The stars blinked quietly above. "You changed everything," she said softly. Ranger turned his head as if listening. "You didn't just save her life, you saved mine. You reminded me to trust again, to believe that healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing love." Anyway, she rested her head against his. He didn't move. He didn't need to, because Ranger had done what few beings ever do. He had bridged the gap between trauma and trust, between fear and family. And though he would never speak, his actions had carved a truth into the world that would not be forgotten. Love, real love, is not without risk. But sometimes, it saves us all. The days that followed were filled with a kind of stillness, not the emptiness of fear, but the quiet of recovery, of healing. Ranger had survived. Against odds, against venom, against time itself. He had made it. Emily spent hours at his side, As he rested in the sunroom, his body slowly regaining strength, Lily would toddle in and curl up beside him, her small hand resting on his side, matching her breath to the rise and fall of his. She didn't understand the full story, not yet. But she understood the heart of it. Ranger was hers, and she was. His David brought home a framed photo one evening. It showed Lily asleep with her head on Ranger's flank, both of them bathed in warm window light. He placed it on the mantel next to a vase of fresh lilies. "So we never forget," he said simply. The story spread further than any of them expected. Local papers picked it up first, then national outlets. Hero dog saves toddler from deadly snake. The headlines made it seem clean, easy. But the truth was deeper, more tangled. Emily didn't just see a heroic act, she saw the cost, the fear, the doubt, the redemption, and the miracle. They held a small gathering in their backyard once Ranger was strong enough. Just a few neighbors, close friends, and the shelter staff who remembered him as the silent dog in the back of the kennel. There were tears, laughter, and gratitude. Emily spoke briefly. She told the story, not from the lens of shock or drama, but of trust. How sometimes the most broken among us become the ones who save. How healing can be mutual. How love isn't about perfection, but about presence. Ranger received a medal that day, from the mayor no less. A simple circle of brass, engraved with one word, protector. But Ranger didn't need medals. He had Lily. In the months that followed, they planted a garden together. Right in the spot where it had happened, where Lily had fallen, where Ranger had stood guard. Wildflowers grew quickly. A bench was added, and one stone, carved with quiet reverence. You didn't just save her life, you saved all of ours. It became their spot. Ranger would lie there in the afternoons, eyes half closed, ears twitching at every rustle. Emily would sit nearby, journal in hand. Lily, now a little taller, would bring Ranger her toys, her secrets, her songs. The garden became more than a place. It became a symbol of second chances, of unseen bravery, of a love that protected without question. And though the headlines faded, the world moved on and new stories took their place. One truth remained. Sometimes a hero doesn't wear a cape. Sometimes he wears scars. And sometimes the most extraordinary miracles begin in the quietest corners of an ordinary backyard, to be continued.